Good morning. Welcome to EXSIN Live. We're going to have some fun today because we're going to talk about coaching. We're going to talk about coaching at different stages and what owners need to do, honestly, to make sure their company survives. And we've dealt with the startup, pre-seed, all the way through funding and coaching and development. And let me explain something to you. In this process, your need for outside advice and mentorship never changes because you should always be growing into the next stage. One of the things we learned in the military is that there are stages. And we simplify it. It's tactical, operational, and strategic. Your company is the same way. And if you are a startup right now, you are in the tactical stage. You are a full-time contributor to the product. You are developing the product. You are the idea person. You are doing all those things. So, Phil, let's start with the tactical part of
it's fun.
Organizational development. It's the best. You get to be an operator.
Tactical's where everybody has fun.
And you learn the business.
You get to dream. You get to start executing. Get to all these cool things.
You just play cool toys.
Cool toys. You're not fully consumed with panicking about money yet.
You're not fully consumed about panicking about money because it's not really where you are. You're in the startup phase. You're growing. You're birthing your company.
Yeah.
To see if it's a product market fit and where it goes. And you've got to be fully engaged in the team and what happens.
Yeah. And that's the key thing. And the number one element through all these stages is the same, is communication, right? Communication is so important when you're going through this stage.
Every stage.
Every stage.
I mean, we see that with everybody we talk to. Communication is one of the most challenging things to do. Now, as you work through the initial part and you say, okay, we've got a product, we're ready to go to market. And we get some clients and we're moving from, friends and family funding to potentially having investors come in or bootstrapping the company, whatever that is. There's a shift that has to take place. Your product needs to be ready to go to market. There'll be adjustments with the product to pivot as required. But this is where I see the biggest challenges. I think you do too. When you move from friends and family to let's be a real business.
Yeah.
If you're a founder and you're switching from pre-seed to outside investors, and you're ready to go to market, you really need to focus on that process.
And that's because it is time consuming.
And it's discouraging and it's not as fun.
No, it's not. This is when the reality of the thing you birthed starts hitting you in the face, because you're going to do a lot of pitches. You're going to have your pitch deck, all your fancy tools. You're going to lay it all out. And what we see with a lot of folks at this stage is, their belief in what their business is worth, what the valuation is, and the reality sometimes are very far apart. And that's a very tough thing to go through. And this is usually when people start learning that, right? And they learn it because the market tells them that. And that can be hard.
Well, Phil, you nailed it. We always think our house is worth more than it is. Yep. We always think our car is worth more than it is. We always think our business is worth more than it is. Yep. This is a gut check. And Matt R. in the article we're kind of pulling from today, he says this is the shift from being a contributor to being a leader. And you've got to manage other people. You can't do the work yourself anymore. You got to let go some because you're focused on how do we grow the company? How do we get the funding in place? It's a company with a ton of pressure because if you're lucky enough to get the funding, now you have a board of people, depending on how much it is, they're expecting results. Mark Zuckerberg is facing this right now. He got
a big way.
He got a call from his board and said, you're going to cut people because you're failing.
Yep.
Right. And this is a mature
first
company.
Time he ever experienced failure.
Most likely. Yep.
I mean, because everything, he was the golden boy.
Smart guy.
Well, yes.
Done well.
Yeah.
But he's having a gut check right now.
Well, because you've got to operate your business with fundamental principles. It's blocking and tackling. And doesn't get to be the Wild West every day where you can spend whatever you want to spend when you want to spend it.
And this is the challenge of being a founder, leader in your organization, because you have this image of what your baby's going to become and how it's going to grow up and be successful. And the market may not agree with your image.
Right.
The market may not like where you're going with what you're doing. And that's what's happening with this largely successful company, Facebook. We see it in startups we work with. The owner has all these ideas and wants to do all these things with their product, but the reality of it is that's not what the market wants.
Well, and we've had owners, that, and again, to go back to this, but that'll say, we'll ask the question, when's the last time you had your business valuated? And usually what we hear is, Well, I think I know what it's worth. What they're really saying is everybody's calling us today, Dave.
I guess we're going to be busy today.
I guess this is a busy day. But this is what happens when you give your cell phone to everybody, right?
That's fact.
Yeah. But anyway, you start, and I'm thinking of one business in particular that we did some work with that hadn't even had their first anniversary, was talking about the valuation being $1 billion. You remember that?
Oh yeah. They just started.
And they just started. And we're like, well, let's get to profitability before we talk about building $1 billion valuation. Not that, because you got to be careful. I mean, you want to continue to dream. You want to have these big goals, these big dreams, but they got to be grounded in reality, right? And that's where a lot of times people are challenged. I've always said, if you take a business that it depends on the industry somewhat, but if each employee you have is generating $200,000 worth of revenue, meaning because everybody's not in direct revenue generating roles, but meaning if you have 10 employees, to me, you have a healthy business with a good profit, typically. If you're doing
$2 million a year,
$2 million a year in top line revenue. Now that's a very rudimentary, basic, not a deep dive, but it usually checks. That usually checks. And so having reality when you're out looking for those investors is really important, because you're going to hear some things that's going to be very hard for you to hear. People are going to bring a lot of reality to the conversation. And it's not that they don't see your vision. It's not that they don't agree that what you're doing is special and it's cool. It's that it's got to be grounded. We've worked with clients that did $2 million in sales and they had the valuation of their business at $30 million. Well, it's just not true. Because we're talking about privately held, small bit. We're not talking about something that's going to go public or something that's, we're not talking about an industry where you can go out and, flip the switch and get to a point where you flip it and turn it on and all these people are flocking. We're talking about very traditional, normal, everyday businesses that have very unrealistic expectations.
I think the big thing to remember here is as you step from that pre-seed to Series A, Series B round as an owner, you need to find trusted advisors that can guide you through the process, because we have watched people do things with investors that have cost them their entire business.
We've literally seen people that have we were in a meeting one time, the group came in from out of state, and this gentleman was so excited, and we told him point blank, if you do this deal, you're going to lose your business within a year. And I don't think it took a year.
I don't think it took a year.
I think it took about 7 months, but you got to be careful, to Dave's point. And when we say trusted advisors, let's walk through if we can, Dave. I know this is kind of,
that's fine. Keep going. You're good.
But who are we talking about when we say trusted advisors? Well, we're talking about competent accounting counsel. Now, this needs to be somebody that probably not the person that does your taxes. It needs to be somebody that understands this type of function. They understand investment. They understand how it works inside a privately held company. They understand that stuff. They're a specialist. Legal counsel, same thing. It's probably not going to be the person that you go to if you have a truck that throws a rock up, if you're in that type of business and it breaks a window and you're defending against somebody suing you. It's going to be somebody that works in mergers, acquisitions, seed funding. All this type of stuff. So you got to really do some research and find the right people. When we're talking about business advisors that have your best interest in mind, they're the people that'll sit there and look at you and say, okay, I know they're saying they'll give you what you want. You're giving up too much to get what you want. And right now you're excited, but 3 to 5 years, you're not going to be excited. Or in a year, you're not going to be excited. Or when you sell, you're not going to be excited because you've given away the farm.
And the trick in this too, that most company owners don't understand, because they haven't played in the space, is investors, funds like to put hurdles on you.
Yep.
And they like to have unrealistic expectations for your company, and then you lose your company. And that's what happened to the one we were talking about earlier. You've got to have people that are savvy and understand the process, because no offense, you may be the smartest person in the world, but you're not an expert in this space, most likely. And you are working with people that are playing a game. Their goal is to make money. And if you succeed, great, they succeed. But they have to have a play where if you don't succeed, they succeed. And that's what you see in a lot of these agreements. You got to be super, super careful. Super careful. And we want you to know that. The second thing that happens as you grow from a pre-seed to a Series A and Series B is that your company grows, right? You have people challenges. You need HR counsel. You need to understand your pay process. Are we doing the right things? Because you've gone from, just kind of doing everything yourself to delegating. What controls do you have in place to make sure things are getting done? More importantly, what do your margins look like? What is, like Phil said before, what is your profit per employee? And are you feasible? Because we've also seen companies that grow too fast.
Yes.
And they exceed their revenue, and now they're operating at a deficit.
Yes. Yeah. And that's a horrible place to find yourself.
It's horrible.
Because you've done you did what you thought was right. You've walked all that out. But I mean, you just got to be very, very careful.
And now cash flow's a mess.
Well, and if cash flow's a mess, everything's a mess.
And you're not going to make it unless you have a great salesman that you can push to sell more.
Well, the only way to get out of a cash flow problem, there's two ways to do it. You can contract your expenses, or you can grow your revenue. You can only contract so far because you got to function, you got to operate, right? So your only solution then is I got to go sell more. So then what happens? We put all this pressure on the people that are responsible for selling. We start leading them with a stick, and driving them to the point to where they're burnout. So you can see where this whole thing just unravels. So you got to be very, very thoughtful in this process.
So let's talk about one of our favorite subjects. Now you're the tweener company, right? You hit middle school. You're reaching puberty as a company. You're at a point where you need more people, but you don't have more money, and you don't have process in place. So you're struggling, but you don't know how to install them.
Right. Sounds like fun.
But it's the reality of a company's growth. They want to grow beyond the 50-person number, which is kind of the hurdle, right?
Yeah.
And the 1 million or 2 million or 10 million a year, whatever that next phase they're going to. This is the time when you bring in outside counsel to walk through your process. If the structure wasn't built initially, you've got to put that structure in.
I go back to one of our clients that when we started working with them, and we're just giving you this for real world examples, but when you looked at the start, over 100 employees, a very healthy top line revenue, but their margin was under 10%.
Yep.
It was painful because they were in an industry, to be quite frank, where they didn't think, normal business practices applied.
And that's an industry standard for that industry.
It's an industry standard for that industry. So it was painful for them, but over time, and it wasn't a long period of time, we were able to get them to start executing real strategies. Now their margins are
through the roof.
They're over 40%. And we're not talking, they didn't raise their prices drastically.
Nope.
But they were smart about how they're running their business. They started really looking at operational efficiencies. They really started looking at, where are we spending our money? Are we just throwing, because everybody always thinks the solution is, well, we just need more people. Well, number one, most expensive solution you can always come up with is to just throw more people. Okay. But you've got to really take a hard look. And the first thing we always encourage people to do is, well, let's look at the roles. What do they do? Do they have a direct impact on the outcome for your customer? Is there real value in that role? The employee might be a great employee. We just might have the employee in the wrong role.
It's fact.
And so we've got to help find the correct role. And what you end up doing is you run much more efficiently, have much more profitability, so you can then reinvest in your own company. And to be quite frank, for privately held companies, we always try to figure out ways for them to not go get outside investors, because we know that at the end of the day, for privately held companies, the big home run, the big payoff is when they sell, or when they
it's a legacy play for transition,
right?
to family,
or when they have a succession plan to go to the next generation. So you got to be protective of all those things, and it's very easy. You make bad decisions when you're feeling pressure.
You do,
and that's where these outside advisors, and really, I think we've had clients tell us, we're like a cup of hot chocolate for them. When they call us, we're able to just talk them off the ledge, if you will, to say, hey, have you thought about this? What about this? We could do this. We could move this. We could, and you need somebody that's not in the middle of the forest, right? I always get this part wrong, but they can't be in the middle amongst all the trees, right? They don't see the forest for all the trees. I got it right again.
Good job.
I'm finally starting to figure this out, but you got to be able to think clear. When we learned this, we were trained this in the military. When everything's going wrong, if you're a flyer like Dave, and you lose an engine on your plane, last thing you want to do is have a pilot that panics. You need a pilot whose breathing is going to slow down. They're going to follow their process. They're going to trust their process. They're going to trust the systems that are in place to make sure they get the aircraft on the ground safely. It's the same thing in business. When stuff goes wrong, if you don't have a process, you got to have a process. You got to be able to follow that process. Your breathing needs to slow down. Dave and I have laughed about this. I do much better in situations where everybody else is panicking because I just naturally, that's kind of my wheelhouse. I like that. It allows me to slow things down. And I think that's where we've got to really stay focused when things aren't. And that's why processes are so important.
Darren, I appreciate your comment. You do have to look from the outside in. You have to get above all the noise to look down on the company. I think when a crisis happens, the first thing to do is take a deep breath and stop and assess the situation. It's analyze the situation, take appropriate action.
Darren, we're going to be doing some cool things with Darren.
We are here in a couple weeks.
Darren, we look forward to that.
It's going to be fun.
Yep.
But the thing I want you to think about now, your company has grown. So you've gone from the tactical level, you're operational now, you're doing good things. Now you're becoming strategic. You've been around 5 or 6 years or 10 years, and your company's kind of stagnating.
Correct.
It's kind of hit a plateau. Now, this is where you want to look at how do innovation has died, all the creativity's kind of gone from the organization, the buzz. How do you reignite that as a business owner when you're at the strategic phase of your business, when you're growing the business that's doing really, really well? Now is the time when you get an innovation coach or a process coach to come in and give you some ideas on how to take a good look at the organization, where you are now, and things you can do to motivate the team to do better, newer things.
Yeah, and I think this is real critical for a lot of reasons, for a lot of obvious reasons, but it's the nuanced stuff, right? A lot of times what you're going to discover when you bring that outside firm in to help you look at things is you're going to see, okay, things aren't the way I thought they were, or you might get confirmation things are exactly the way I thought they were.
Yep.
But what you now have is you have an outside set of eyes. You have an outside point of view. And I use the analogy all the time. You can have the greatest family doctor, general practitioner in the world that you know, like, and trust. You've been going to him for 20 years. God forbid one day you go in, they run tests and say, I think you have a brain tumor. I don't want him doing my surgery, and I don't want him doing the diagnosis. I want to go to somebody that specializes in that stuff. And I think it's important that we understand that. Running a business effectively, there's a lot that goes into it, but it's understanding what you don't know, I think, is one of the most critical steps that we make as founders, is saying, okay, this is my baby. I birthed it. I'm getting into some unfamiliar territory here. Let's go find somebody that really knows this stuff that can help me make sure I don't make any mistakes. Because that's where most times vehicles are driven off the cliff. And
you bring a great point up. It's probably the point we should close with, because it's really important. Be willing to admit what you don't know and ask for help.
Yes.
There's a lot of business owners that are too proud to ask for help. And you're going to put yourself in a really bad situation if you do that. There are so many people out there that want to help you and see you succeed, whether it's a mentor, a friend, a company. Go find those people that can lead you to the water so you can drink and survive and grow your business, because every business out there has an opportunity to be successful.
Everybody does. But remember, as a leader, as a founder, you got to ask. Do not try to BS your way through this. Don't go read a book.
Fake it till you make it is not the way to run a business.
It's dumb. So don't try to BS your way through it. You read a book and now you think you're an expert on raising capital, or you think you're an expert on this. Know what you're good at. You're obviously very good at a lot of things, or you wouldn't have gotten your business to this stage. But stay in your lane. Bring people in that have those lanes that you need help with. A couple things are going to happen. Number one, you're going to make better decisions. And number two, you are going to learn through observation and being a part of that process, so that when it's time to do it again, you have a little more knowledge, you understand a little more. So you got to trust yourself, but you got to be honest with yourself.
That's a fact.
Yep.
So don't be afraid to ask for help. We're here to help if you need it, but make sure you find some good trusted advisors that can help you grow your business and be hugely successful. With that, for EXSIN Live, Dave and Phil, we are out of here.